So last thing here, I do want to throw this at you. John Collins' name has been thrown around a ton in trade talks this year. There's been a report that Atlanta is going to listen to offers on him. I guess the thinking is that he's not going to fit into the future plans of Atlanta, or he's going to be too expensive to retain, or anything like that. I don't know what the sentiment is on the Atlanta side, or how much truth you think there is to the prospect that he could get moved this year. But for a Celtics team that definitely needs a move, some help here, he would probably fit into those plans. Now, it'd be a ton of competition. There would obviously be a big asking price from the Atlanta side, but where do you think John Collins is in the short and long-term plans for this team?
Yeah, I mean the fact that the Hawks are listening to offers on John isn't necessarily new because they were listening to offers last year at the trade deadline. There were a couple teams who inquired about him. So the fact that it kind of got blown out of proportion in the past few days, just because a couple of national writers tweeted about it. I mean, this has been going on for over a year now that they've been
Yeah.
listening to. So there's nothing new there. The you know they think John is talented. There's no denying that. I mean, last year he's 20 and 10 and shooting 40% from three. This year I think he was like 18 and 8. His numbers have gone down a little bit just because of the fact that there's more talent on the roster now and more people are getting looks at the rim, Capella specifically. But his efficiency numbers are through the roof. I haven't looked in the past couple of days after the Boston game, but for most of the season, he's been the guy who's led the team in on-off numbers this season, even with him being 18 and 8. So for the Hawks, they're not just going to trade him for a bag of chips. They're going to want something meaningful and impactful if they were to deal him before the trade deadline. So our Shams Sharania with the Athletic reported that the Hawks were looking for a high first round pick, a lottery level talent at least. The problem with trying to trade John is he only makes $4 million, and when he's obviously worth more than $4 million, it's hard to get something in return that is meaningful for the Hawks side of things. So what I think is going to happen is that the Hawks are certainly going to continue listening to offers. If they do get blown away by an offer before the trade deadline, then Collins is going to be moved. That's just the nature of the business, just because of the fact that when you look at other important decisions that the Hawks are going to have to make, Young is eligible for a max extension starting this summer. Then the following year, you have DeAndre Hunter and Cam Reddish. Kevin Huerter is also eligible for an extension this summer. So you have guys on your team that you have to figure out who's a part of this future. If they are not comfortable paying two guys a max deal, I assume that Trey is going to get the max. I mean, it just makes sense that he's going to get the max. They've been building around this guy for 3 years now. So do you want two max contracts, which is what John is looking for in free agency? And he's probably going to get somewhere close to the max just because of the fact that when you look at the 2021 free agents, he's top three probably. He's 23 years old. He has potential to get 20 and 10 every night. Shoots 40% from three. He's gotten better defensively. Some team is going to give him money. I look at Dallas as a perfect example of a team that cleared out cap space with the hopes that Giannis was going to become available. Miami has a lot of money. They were trying to get Giannis. Who else? The Spurs. I think he would fit in nicely with San Antonio. So there are teams that have money who could potentially offer him 110, 120 million dollars this year. I mean, in the offseason. So I'm interested to see what's going to happen. The Hawks could decide to play it out, go into free agency, see what that offer is, see what the offer sheet that he signs is, and decide if they want to match or not. If they don't, then they could obviously work out a sign and trade, which is what Boston did this past offseason with Gordon Hayward.
So this is my idea here. I think I'm going to try to appease both sides in a deal like this because there's not a lot of stomach for trading Marcus Smart among the Celtics fans. Reasonably so. Like I would hate to see Marcus Smart go. This is a guy who's been with the team since I started covering them. Is like their first pick under Brad Stevens. They'd set them up to make the playoffs multiple times, multiple Eastern Conference Finals. But like you said, Atlanta's going to have to be moved in a deal like this. And you say lottery pick, not a recent lottery pick, but there's a guy who went number 6 in the draft, lived up to that. Defense, playmaking, shooting, and signed for 2 years. And then you could possibly sign him after that. That's the kind of player I think Atlanta would listen to. Now, maybe it would take more than this. But you bring in Collins, which is something the Celtics would have to do there. Smart's up after next year. If you're signing Collins, he's around for 4 or 5 years then compared to Smart, who's probably here for 2 years and then gone realistically, which is something we're going to have to start talking about on the Celtics side. So you could get ahead of that a little bit. Bring in Rondo. I know you said he has nothing left, but maybe just as a voice in the room. Better than Jeff Teague, though, I'd say probably at this point. And this could be the beginning of a deal here. Now, does Atlanta have to get some picks on a deal like this? I just think it makes sense from a team building standpoint, using the Cantor TP possibly here, or just matching this money to set this up and then still having the full TP to go from there. Like this is a deal to me that makes so much sense for both sides. Smart can play alongside Young, help him out on the defensive side of the floor, be a defensive piece for that team. To you, who says no to this?
I mean, I think it's a deal that makes a lot of sense for both sides. The Hawks need more defensive talent on the roster, and Marcus is one of the best backcourt defenders in the league. So I think that is a deal that makes a lot of sense. I've seen some people with Boston trades say like, Collins should be traded for Grant Williams. Who am I missing?
Romeo Langford, Aaron Nesmith.
I mean, you're not gonna the Hawks aren't gonna trade this guy for spare parts. I mean those guys could blossom into something down the road, but you're talking about again someone who can get 20 and 10 every night and shoot 40% from three. They're not going to trade him for again a bag of chips. They want something, and Marcus Smart is definitely someone who, when I've been looking at okay, which teams would make sense for John to go to, I think Boston makes a lot of sense. If Boston was able to part ways with Marcus Smart, which I know is tough. He's beloved in Boston. I get that, but when you're talking about adding a talent like John to the roster, it's going to have to cost some sort of price.
So to you, would that be worth it for Boston? I mean, Smart would not be an easy piece to let go. There could be ramifications there defensively, team chemistry-wise, that kind of thing. You lose your heart and soul. That's something you can't measure on the stat sheet and those different kind of things that we talk about there. But Collins, I mean, from what I've seen of him, he looks like he'd be a great fit in this system. You've talked about his defensive improvements, which is the worry with him. Great offensive player, defense the question. But he's 23. He'd be here long term. He's a shooter, slasher, cutter off the ball. And I know people in the comments are saying, oh, they need a big. He's a guy that can play 5 feasibly in this league a little bit. So there's versatility with him. It's an ability to sign a player you wouldn't be able to sign otherwise since there's no cap space here. And then keep him long-term with the restricted free agency. But on the court specifically, do you think this would be worth it for Boston?
I mean, I do. It's he's kind of what I think the Celtics need to, be up there with the Brooklyns and Milwaukee's and Phillies and all those teams. I think it's a move that could certainly put them over the top and have them in the mix starting this year. I think he's really good.
Yeah.
I think good. I know a lot of people don't watch the Hawks. They're never on national TV. But from watching John's career in these past 3 years, I mean, he's gotten better every single year. I think there's still room for him to grow. If he can become a little bit better handling the ball and being more of a playmaker, you're talking about one of the better, well-rounded big men in the league. Because again, he shoots the ball really, really well. So I think it does make sense for Boston to consider something like this. I think Rajon Rondo would be someone who would be enthused to join an actual contender. I mean, the Hawks are wanting to get in the playoffs, but like Boston has title aspirations. So perhaps that lights a fire under his belt. Obviously, I mean, he was brilliant with the Celtics, and maybe that would spark something inside of him to take it to another gear. He was obviously critical for the Lakers in the playoffs last season, so maybe that side of Rondo's game emerges on an actual contender. Who knows? But I think that if we're talking about realistic trades, I think this is definitely the start of the framework that could get something done for both sides.
Yeah, and it still leaves the Celtics with a ton of ammunition to do other things as well. I mentioned this doesn't even touch the TPE, the 28 million TPE. If there's no picks involved, which maybe there would have to be like one future first protected or something like that going to Atlanta, that leaves you with pick ammunition to make other deals. So people are talking about Collins wouldn't be the center against Embiid and Giannis and the likes. That's true, but the still full front court would still be here. You'd still be able to mix that up somehow, maybe add another wing, because this Celtics team is multiple moves away with how they look right now. They need more veterans, less young players. And so this double dip idea that I've been coming up with the last few days, where you get Collins and then you still have 28 million to use now or later during the off season, to me is a no-brainer. Makes the team a lot more expensive, but if you're going for it, if you're the Celtics, you got to ramp up the payroll, add veterans, guys who can contribute right now, because as you mentioned, Aaron Nesmith and Romeo Langford and Grant Williams, and that being the rotation, just is a two-sided approach to this team that isn't working right now. Like Brown and Tatum are ready to go. The rest of the roster is not. And that's what we saw on Wednesday. And we'll probably see it again tonight as this team continues its inconsistent stretch.